Good morning, everyone out there in Spec Ed 2 land. Today I am going to walk you through a few strategies that I use to plan assessment for my class and deliver effective assessment for, as, and of learning. What I am going to show you are two platforms that I use for students to access course material, how I communicate with them, and how I give them, well, at least attempt to give them timely and accurate feedback. So the first platform is Google Classroom, and on Google Classroom, the very first piece that I do with them and the first plan in my assessment for the course, since we do use Classroom so extensively, is that I want to make sure during the first couple of days that students have at least mastered part of what Google Classroom is. So it's including your digital pedagogy in your lessons and not just putting Classroom up and saying, hey students, use Classroom, click on this stream, open this, and then your work's all going to be there. So we figure out the purpose, why Classroom is used, and how that can be an effective and powerful tool for students to be successful assessment-wise in the class. So on the second day that we have class, after we've established expectations and classroom procedures and such, is I get the students to take a Google Classroom quiz. So the Google Classroom quiz is here, and on the Google Classroom quiz it is a Google form, and the materials that the students need to be successful are attached to the Classroom page as well. So where I was the to-do list. So in Google Classroom, students can access their to-do list, and I show them how to filter this down so they can see which class they're supposed to be looking at. So this lists all of their work that they still have to do, and then of course they have work over here which is done. Another piece that the students use, and again this falls under assessment for knowledge, so students can only move forward once they've shown me that they've somewhat mastered Google Classroom, is if we go back to the class page and then the students go to classwork and then click on view your work. Here students can find all the work that has been assigned in the right hand column and all of the work that they still need to complete. So if it still reads assigned, then the student can click on it and then click view details and add a file and mark as done. Once they do that, if they go back into view your work, they can see that it's now been turned in. Also at the very top of the page, if students want to find what their marks are in the course, it constantly updates it in the top right hand corner of the screen, which you can't see here because of course this is just a test page that I am working on. So that's the first page. We looked at view your work, and we also looked at the to-do list. So as I go through the course, I always model and practice and use the language that we used on the first day or the second day when they did their Google Classroom work. So I go through the steps, and even in an instructional video I will still go through the steps and explicitly use the language, such as when you're on the classroom stream, click on the classwork tab, then click view your work and scroll down to how will I measure my success. How will I measure my success? So this is an interesting start and segues into the next piece, which is check-ins with students and following learning goals and success criteria. So at the beginning of this particular course, students and I looked at several ways that they could be successful. We used a collaboration tool called Padlet, and you can use many other tools. You can use Google Drawings, you can use Poplet, you can use even a Google Doc if you'd like, to help students collaborate and establish, in this case, what success means in this class. So this particular piece of success This is tied directly with the Google Classroom lesson that they did the day prior. And these serve as success criteria for success in the class. So we establish this and then we revisit this as students go through, and we work this in as part of weekly meetings as well. And with these 4 categories, we can also establish check-ins with the students. So as an instructor, we talk on the second day and first day about what an effective instructor or teacher can give to students. So we have 4 categories: clear expectations, feedback, work completion, and assessment. So following up with the video that I shot before, there's always a strategy or skill and a tool attached to those pieces. So we again incorporate the digital pedagogy piece into the lesson. So now that we have established the success criteria to know if they are successful, we have a baseline for weekly meetings to ask, okay, if you are not achieving the goals that you set out to achieve, which of the 4 categories could we work together as an instructor and a student to improve upon that? And then we have a way to move forward, and we can add some detail to that. We can look at the different strategies and tools. So for instance, did the instructor provide timely feedback? So did the instructor respond in a timely fashion that the student was able to read and respond to their comments on Google Classroom to be able to go in and ask any questions or fix and improve on anything they did before? So then it gets into an assessment as learning as well. Okay, so now I'm going to change tabs back to the instructor view, and we will show some ways that we look at portfolio learning and also how to post learning goals that will go, and students can use those to improve upon as well. So normally on a lesson, I will post learning goals directly in the announcement or directly in the assignment. So you can see here that there are 3 learning goals and success criteria, or I've combined them in this case to be very specific, so they are success criteria. These are based upon the specific objectives of the course, but you can see here that I've added the specific topic at the end here. So what I get students to do is I get them to add this to what's called their coursework document. And this is the same coursework document that they answer textbook questions on as well. So it directly ties the subject matter to the learning goals. And the way that we utilize those learning goals is we take them towards the end of a unit, and we will co-create either a raft or some sort of summative that could possibly meet those learning goals. So we go through the learning goals, we list them, and then we give examples of how the lessons met those learning goals. And we include subject matter from that unit. And from that, again, students are able to develop their own assessments, their own final assessments that play to their strengths. We can use the raft form that I posted in my last post, and students can figure out a specific type of final product that meets their learning styles. The next piece that we have is what I call the customer profile. So this is the document that we look at as assessment as learning, where the students get to be equal partners in their learning. So we have here progress at the midterm. Progress at the midterm. And students have added their own strategies in here that they believe they can use to improve upon. We can also use this form to celebrate victories from these students, from goals that they established at the beginning of the year. Now this doesn't just take into account academic success. We're looking at the non-academic success, or the learning skills as well. Learning skills as well, which are the ungraded. So if we look at this, there is a way that I can utilize Google Forms and attach a Google form to Google Classroom under the View Your Work section that students can use to assess their learning skills. So what I've done with this Google form is I have simplified the language for each of the learning skills, and this is language that comes directly from Growing Success. So students are able to evaluate themselves based on a 4-category evaluation, just like on the progress reports and report cards. So 4 being excellent and 1 being needs improvement, using the exact same language again that is on the report cards under the learning skills evaluation. So this is a lesson. This is a lesson that I do with the class for the first time and review it a second time, and we will do this at least 3 times in a course to see how students are doing. And again, that would be added to the customer profile for students to be able to revisit, and we can include that in the ongoing discussion under assessment as learning. We can also tie it directly to their success or lack of success at that time, or lack of progress, and we can have that conversation, and it's them using their own language about what they said instead of a teacher telling them what they need to do to be successful. So they're taking some ownership of that success and of that progress. And we can also inform next steps and what they have to do. So this is all fine and good, and if I find if I don't revisit this and I don't include this as a consistent part of the course, then students and I both get lost in the process of every day, which is rushing through content and trying to get to that end product, which can't be a one-size-fits-all, and students are not going to feel like they own that success. So what we use for that in this class is what I call the 21st Century Learning Form, and this is again something you can either embed on a Brightspace page, or you can sit down with a student if they don't want to be on a computer that day, and you can walk through the 21st Century Learning Form with them. And this is something that I made up in my, I would say, 4th year of teaching, and it was in collaboration with the Student Success Department. So we looked at Learning for All, we looked at Growing Success, and we wanted to see if there was a way that we could analyze 21st century learning. So have those students take ownership of that learning. And again, this would allow not only the student but also the instructor to inform the next steps. So there are questions on this form such as, do you understand the expectations of the course? And that would be the learning goals and success criteria that we visit. Do you understand what you are learning? So we're looking at knowledge and thinking. Do you care about your learning? To see if students are engaged in what they're learning about. So even if they don't necessarily like the material, they may be engaged in the process of being in class. And that drives it to the next question, which is, do you feel in control of your own mark? And if they don't, we can revisit that and say, okay, do you know where to find your mark on Google Classroom? Do you know why you got the mark on the last project? So a student may say no, and then we both realize as an instructor and a student that they never used the checklist for the project. So they haven't been using the checklist all along. Or they may have completely missed a week of class and they feel just generally out of control. And again, we have more engagement here. We have engagement in their own learning, and then we have some specific comments. So we have list at least 2 examples down here and specific skills they'll take away from the course, and they have an opportunity to put that down here. So those examples come directly from either, say, if they're allowed to be creative, and we use the exact language from the questions above. So again, any information from this form can be applied to the customer profile. What I really, really like about this, about the forms, is that I will print the learning skills forms and the 21st century learning form results and attach those directly to either a progress report, or I will use those and the language from those directly for a report card. So the student, if they're sitting there with the parent, they are able to in fact drive the conversation. And most of the time I will just turn to the student and ask the student, hey, how do you think you're doing? And the student will have an opportunity then to explain it to the parent instead of me. So it becomes way more of a collaborative process between the three of us, between student, instructor, and parent. It also clarifies feedback because we have some exact language that we use in the classroom. So the timely feedback, students can go back to the to-do list. And finally, if we're looking at peer and self-evaluation, there are a couple of ways that I use that in class. One can be quite simply looking at a question in a classroom on Google Classroom. Here we see that we have a number of responses by students about this question. Now this class is not so engaged in responding with each other, and that's okay because that informs the next step for the class, which is the fact that we need to work more on collaboration. It's a real challenge when I have students, 10 students that could be at completely different spots in the course, but they can come back to here and reply to people and start the conversation that way. This was going back to success criteria. So that's one way to look at peer evaluation. Another way that I practice peer evaluation is, and this is an example from a checklist for a civics culminating project for grade 10. So this is the self-evaluation checklist, which includes individual, and it also includes, it includes the written product, and it also includes the presentation product at the end. So I will use this form as students can print it out if they don't like to do this on computer, and they can do this online as well, but either way they do have to hand it in. So every student has the same evaluation, but again, the product does not have to be the same, so it really does cater to differentiated instruction and different learners. And really, to be honest, nobody wants to see 64 Google slide presentations because it gets pretty boring after about the 5th one or so. So this checklist, once students have filled this out, the final piece, which is assessment form 5 or visual and oral presentation, we have a symposium on the last day of civics, and in that symposium every student gets handed a number of these peer evaluation forms, and they will go around and see students' presentations. So instead of the symposium format where only, say, 5 students out of a class of 30 present at one time, and then you go around at stations and see those presentations, also helps decrease the pressure and the stress and anxiety that's created for students who really don't want to present in front of a class of 30 people. Instead, they're maybe presenting to 3 other students at a time in front of them. So I found that very effective. The next piece and last piece is we're going to revisit the raft that I posted in the last post, and this includes the concepts that students need to know, and this of course is revisiting the concepts that we would have looked at over and over in the class. In my workplace law course, we revisit this every week. We do a review, and students add this to their portfolio learning project, which is called the Post-Apocalyptic Legal Society, and I can explain much more about that some other time. But you can see here that students have a variety of suggested role, audience, format, and topics. And then finally, a checklist at the bottom that all students complete. One last piece about this is, what I really like is if you're revisiting the topics and the success criteria and learning goals over and over and over again. One of the wonderful things about that is that it really helps reduce mark load, because what you can do is you can quite simply say, come and see me if a student wants to improve. You can also be really specific and say, refer to your checklist, because a lot of students wouldn't have done that, or I will just say in my feedback, you missed checklist points number 5 and 6 because they weren't checked off. A last part which I'd like to show, because I'm quite pleased about this, is that when I taught in Brightspace in the summer, it allows you to complete checklists here. This was for an applied level group of learners for Canadian history, and I was realizing that I wasn't getting a lot of work in and the workload was just too much. So one of the wonderful things about Brightspace is that it gives you so much information that you can either take it or leave it, as long as you maintain the integrity of the learning goals and success criteria, the specific objectives and overall objectives that are posted at the beginning of the class. And of course in history, because we look at historical thinking skills, the content and the amount of content is not as important as students mastering the skills. So I was able to whittle down a lot of the content while still maintaining the integrity of the course. And for applied level learners, with many with IEPs who benefit from chunking and benefit from the checklist format, I was able to complete that with the calendar tasks here and a timeline for them, and I found I had a lot more engagement from students when that happened, and the success levels went up significantly from the year before. Right, that was a whole lot of information, and I really appreciate it if you stayed with me and listened for the entire 21 minutes. 22 now. If you have any questions, please let me know. It's been fun so far and fun sharing, and I hope to get online more and comment on some other posts today. Talk to you all soon. Thanks again.